Imagine waking up 50,000 years ago in the middle of the Ice Age. There are no pharmacies, no painkillers, no running water, and no modern hygiene products. Outside your shelter, predators move through the darkness. Your tribe is preparing to travel across freezing land in search of food. Survival depends on endurance, and then your period starts. Today, menstruation is treated like an inconvenience, but for prehistoric women, it was something far more intense, a survival challenge woven directly into daily life. So, how did ancient humans deal with periods while hunting, migrating, escaping predators, and surviving brutal winters? The answer reveals something almost never shown in history books. Because prehistoric women were not helpless. They were some of the toughest humans who ever lived, and the way they handled menstruation completely changes how we imagine ancient life. When most people picture prehistoric humans, they imagine mammoth hunts, cave paintings, and primitive weapons. But almost nobody thinks about the biological realities of everyday survival. Ancient women still had cramps, they still bled, they still had to manage hygiene in a world without toilets, medicine, or privacy. At first glance, it sounds impossible. But humans are adaptation machines. For tens of thousands of years, women survived these cycles using nothing except knowledge passed down through generations and materials gathered directly from nature. And strangely enough, prehistoric menstruation may have looked completely different from what modern women experience today. Because the biggest surprise is not how ancient women managed periods. It is how rarely they actually had them. A modern woman today may experience around 400 to 450 periods in her lifetime, but many prehistoric women likely experienced fewer than 50. That sounds impossible, but biologically, it makes perfect sense. In the modern world, people reach puberty earlier, have fewer children, and spend decades cycling every month. Prehistoric life worked differently. Ancient humans lived under constant physical stress, food was inconsistent, daily life demanded enormous energy. Because of this, girls likely began menstruating later than modern humans, often in their late teens. And once adulthood began, most women spent large portions of their lives either pregnant or breastfeeding. Breastfeeding naturally suppresses ovulation in a process called lactational amenorrhea. Lactational amenorrhea. In simple terms, nursing a child could pause menstruation for years. Some hunter-gatherer mothers breastfed children for 3 or even 4 years. During that time, periods often became extremely rare. Anthropologists studying traditional societies discovered that natural fertility populations experience far fewer menstrual cycles than women in industrialized societies today. In other words, the non-stop monthly cycle modern humans consider normal may actually be unusual in human evolutionary history, but periods still happened. And when they did, women had to manage them in some of the harshest environments on Earth. This is where ancient survival knowledge becomes fascinating. Without factories or modern products, prehistoric women turned directly to nature. In cold forests and wet environments, many likely used sphagnum moss. This moss is incredibly absorbent and naturally antibacterial. It can soak up large amounts of liquid while helping prevent infection. Thousands of years later, humans were still using it as emergency wound dressing during World War I. Imagine a prehistoric woman walking through a damp forest, gathering soft moss by hand, knowing exactly which plants were safest for her body. That knowledge was survival. In colder regions, animal hides were another solution. Softened rabbit fur, deer hide, and carefully cleaned pelts could be layered into primitive absorbent pads. Women scraped, boiled, and softened skins until they became flexible enough to wear comfortably. Coastal tribes discovered something even more surprising: sea sponges. Natural ocean sponges are soft, reusable, and highly absorbent. Ancient people living near coastlines likely cleaned and reused them repeatedly. Different environments created different solutions. Human adaptation was everywhere. As civilization slowly emerged, these methods evolved further. Ancient Egyptians softened papyrus into absorbent material. Ancient Greeks wrapped lint around small wooden pieces to create early tampons. Native American tribes used buffalo grass and cedar bark. Every culture developed its own survival technology. But one detail shocks modern audiences the most. Many ancient women likely just free-bled, and in prehistoric life that may not have been considered unusual at all. Modern society treats blood very differently than ancient humans did. Today, stained clothing can feel embarrassing. Cleanliness standards are extreme. Privacy is expected everywhere. But prehistoric humans lived outdoors. Blood was already part of daily survival. Hunting animals, preparing meat, injuries from travel, people constantly encountered blood in ordinary life. Menstrual blood was likely viewed far more practically than it is today. There were no spotless white couches, no office dress codes, no bathrooms hidden behind locked doors. A tribe of 30 people shared almost everything. Privacy barely existed. Periods were not some secret hidden experience. They were simply part of human life. And then scientists discovered something even stranger. Humans are actually one of the very few mammals on Earth that menstruate at all. Most mammals do not bleed every month. If pregnancy does not happen, many animals simply reabsorb the uterine lining back into the body. Humans do something completely different. We shed it. Why? Because human pregnancy is unusually aggressive. Human embryos burrow deeply into the uterine wall, connecting directly into the mother's blood supply to steal enormous amounts of nutrients. Our massive brains require incredible energy to grow. To protect itself, the female body builds an unusually thick uterine lining. It acts almost like a biological defensive barrier. But if pregnancy fails or the embryo is unhealthy, the body sheds the entire lining instead of reabsorbing it. Menstruation may actually be part of an evolutionary defense system designed to protect the mother. In other words, periods are not a biological mistake. They are part of the reason human beings survived at all. And once you understand that, ancient menstruation starts looking very different. Not weakness, not fragility, adaptation. For decades, historians believed ancient cultures isolated menstruating women because they were considered unclean or cursed, but newer research suggests something very different. In many societies, these separate spaces may actually have been places of rest. Think about prehistoric life for a moment. Every day involved exhausting physical labor, walking long distances, collecting food, carrying children, preparing hides, maintaining fires, and surviving brutal weather. Life never stopped. A temporary break from those responsibilities may have been incredibly valuable. Among some indigenous cultures, menstruation was treated as a time for recovery, reflection, and bonding with other women, not punishment. Rest. In a harsh survival environment, communal care mattered. Women shared knowledge, techniques, and experiences. Around ancient fires, survival information passed from one generation to the next. Which plants reduced pain, which moss absorbed best, which materials stayed warm during winter travel. This was not primitive ignorance. It was sophisticated environmental knowledge built over thousands of years. But as civilizations grew larger, attitudes slowly changed. Agriculture, property ownership, inheritance systems, and rigid religious structures increasingly controlled female biology. What may once have been communal care gradually transformed into shame and restriction. The meaning changed. But for most of human history, menstruation was simply another reality of survival. And prehistoric women endured it while surviving conditions most modern humans could barely imagine. The next time you walk past a modern pharmacy aisle filled with brightly colored products, think about the women who survived this reality tens of thousands of years ago. Imagine them sitting beside Ice Age fires beneath dark skies, wrapped in animal hides while storms moved across the wilderness. Imagine crossing frozen land, carrying children, while managing a biological cycle with nothing except natural materials and shared knowledge. Human history is not only the story of warriors, kings, or giant battles, it is also the story of quiet endurance, of ordinary people surviving impossible conditions every single day. And every modern human alive today exists because countless prehistoric women successfully endured this reality long before modern civilization ever existed. They were not fragile. They were formidable. If you enjoyed this deep dive, like the video and subscribe. Comment below what mystery should we explore next. Keep questioning history.